Chapter 29 Balance. Your hand opens and closes, opens and closes. If it were always a fist, or always stretched open, you would be paralyzed. Your deepest presence is in every small contracting and expanding, the two as beautifully balanced and coordinated as birds' wings. Rumi. Balance is another universal truth that has been taught the world over. From China, we are taught about the two polarizing forces called Yin and Yang. Yin is associated with feminine energy. It is like a passive canyon that brings forth life from its cold, dark, watery crevice. The Yang is the masculine mountain peak that boasts its strength in the face of the dry heat of the sun. The Wei, or Tao, is a balanced flow of these forces. Both are equally important. A battery is useful when it is both positively and negatively charged. Only then can the current flow from it. All things have their opposite, and that is how balance is kept. Does that mean that every time I do a good deed, someone else must do a bad one? Maybe, but there are other ways of looking at opposites. Nothing is intrinsically good or bad. A knife is a good thing when it helps us prepare food or cut rope, but it is bad if used to harm another being. Words can be used to share loving thoughts or to mentally harm. As the book of Ecclesiastes states, there is a season and a time to every purpose under heaven, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to break down and a time to build up, a time to mourn and a time to dance, a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing, a time to keep and a time to cast away, a time for silence and a time to speak, a time to love and a time to hate, a time of war and a time of peace. To kill an innocent person so that you can take from them is bad, but to protect your family from violence with violence is justifiable if there is no other alternative. On the other hand, if used in the wrong way, even love can be bad. To love an object more than your family would be misplaced love, and therefore wrong. Thus, neither the yin or the yang are bad or good, they are just opposite ends of the pole. The Middle Way. 500 BCE was a time of religious reform in many parts of the world, and it was around this time that a prince was born in a small kingdom in India. His name was Gautama, and he grew up with all of the ease and comfort of royal life. Within the palace and courtyard, Gautama knew nothing of pain, sorrow, or death. That is, until one day, as a young man, he went out among the commoners and saw people that were poor, sick, and weak. Going from a state of blissful ignorance to the shocking reality of suffering was so traumatic for Gautama that he decided to live in the wilderness as an ascetic. Ascetic practices involve fasting, foraging for berries, wearing simple homemade clothes, or no clothes at all, letting the hair grow into dreadlocks, jatas, showing devotion to the gods regularly through prayer and other rituals. Gautama grew so thin that one could clearly see his ribs beneath the skin. Far from the happy fat guy that the Chinese turned him into, he strove to overcome all physical desires and appetites. One day he was meditating under a tree, and a goddess named Mara came to tempt him with beautiful dancing girls. This is reminiscent of the temptation of Jesus by Satan. After a 40-day fast, Jesus was tempted with worldly desires such as food and political power. Just as Jesus accomplished 500 years later, Gautama was not deterred by the sensuous temptations. At that point of complete self-mastery, Siddhartha Gautama became a Buddha, enlightened one. In his enlightened state, Gautama realized that the life of ease of his childhood and his current life of mortification and self-denial were two extremes, and that the best course of action is to find balance, to follow the middle way. Siddhartha Gautama Buddha then taught that life is suffering, but that one could minimize that suffering by taking the middle way, which has an eightfold path. The 8 virtues of this path are right views, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, effort, mindfulness, and concentration. Through developing these characteristics, one can obtain liberation from suffering. Of course, by integrating these qualities in our life, we will alleviate the suffering of others as well. The Buddhist Middle Way is similar to the Taoist way, in that it is the correct choices that keep us on the path. Taoists also teach Wu Wei, sometimes translated as non-action. Adherents are taught to carry out their duties in a way that conforms to the natural rhythms of life, to go with the flow of the way. Lao Tzu wrote, "There is no greater sin than desire, no greater curse than discontent, no greater misfortune than wanting something for oneself. Therefore, he who is content will always have enough." The proverbial saying, "moderation in all things," is used by many groups, from Mormons to Sufi Muslims. The Greek poet Hesiod wrote, "Moderation is best in all things." It should be common sense that one should not do anything in excess or to the extreme. The many cases of Catholic priests taking the extreme vow of celibacy only to go to the other extreme of sexual debauchery and pedophilia is a clear example of what not to do. I tend to rip on Catholicism because it is easy to do, but most people that belong to the religion are good people. Moderate asceticism and its benefits. Let's take fasting for example. If one were to fast too long, they would die. Yet moderate fasting has been shown to aid in the production of ketones, DNA repair, and heightened mental awareness. Latter-day Saints fast for 24 hours without food or drink once a month. Muslims fast during the daylight for the whole month of Ramadan. Pythagoras would regularly fast for 40 days for better health and creativity. The ancients fasted from food and drank only water. Moses, Elijah, and Jesus all fasted for 40 days. Priests and shamans throughout all ancient cultures would fast prior to initiations and other rituals for increased clarity and power. Paracelsus wrote, "Fasting is the greatest remedy, the physician within." Hippocrates, a physician of the 5th century BCE, now called the father of modern medicine, said, "The addition of food should be much rarer, since it is often useful to completely take it away. When a patient is fed too richly, the disease is fed as well. Excess is against nature." Extreme asceticism, like the Catholic self-flagellation for penance or bouncing from Mardi Gras to Lent, are not good for the body or soul. Useful work puts healthy stress on the body, while overtraining, as many athletes do, leads to poor health and premature death. A primitive lifestyle is ideal for the human body, but in modern-day life we have to simulate what our ancestors did naturally. Extreme diet fads tell us to eat a high-carb, low-fat diet, or a low-glycemic ketogenic diet, but the primitive humans ate what they could, when they could, it was less, and it was natural. Vegetarianism is a form of moderation in diet. It is also taught in many spiritual and philosophical teachings. Many Hindus are religiously vegetarian, and many offshoots like the Hare Krishna and Radha Swami teach people to not eat other animals. The Hindus, Buddhists, and Jains have a teaching called ahimsa, which means non-violence, and it includes not killing or consuming other beings. Many Jains take ahimsa to the point of sweeping as they walk in order to avoid stepping on any bugs. Some Jains take asceticism to the extreme by not wearing any clothing for protection. There are also extreme vegans that value the life of other animals over human life. Clearly, all life should be valued. Some might argue that plants have life and therefore vegetarians do not value all life. It is true that all forms of life have to consume to stay alive. The plants consume sunlight, water, and minerals from the earth, and some beasts eat raw flesh of their own kind. That is why vegetarianism is the middle way. The consciousness of spinach is quite different from that of a horse or cow. Many plants have evolved bright, sweet fruit to attract animals like us to eat them as a way of spreading their seed. The fruits simply fall from the tree. As for herbs, they do not have nerves, so pruning them would be like giving them a haircut. The benefits of vegetarianism and veganism are great and very pertinent to our time. The consumption of animal products has caused a rise in cancer and heart disease in humans, the deforestation of the rainforests, climate change in the ozone, and the misuse of water and grain resources. It takes 2,500 gallons of water, 35 pounds of topsoil, 12 pounds of grain, and a gallon of gasoline to produce just 1 pound of hamburger. Those resources could be put to better use. Not to mention the massive karmic debt humanity is building up by supporting the mass slaughter of innocent creatures. Veganism is an answer to many world problems, including overpopulation. If we all lived a moderate lifestyle, there would be room for many more. For our health, the animals, and the earth, we should all adopt a vegan diet. I say vegan because the egg and dairy industry are just as harmful to the planet, humans, and other animals as the meat industry. If you have a cow that naturally gets pregnant every year or so, and she produces more milk than her baby calf can drink, it may be alright for you to squeeze the lactation from her udder and drink a glass or two, if you're into that. Likewise, there is no harm in wearing wool. If the sheep are treated well, they merely get a welcomed haircut as the heat of summer approaches. Smoking bees out of their hives and taking the extra honey is probably not too bad either. But wearing leather is just gross, even if the animal died of natural causes. Would you wear your dead grandmother's skin? The Pythagoreans practiced various forms of beneficial asceticism. A year of silence before initiation is a bit extreme, but they knew the benefits of eating a strictly vegetarian diet. Many religions of their time still practiced the barbaric ritual of animal sacrifice. Moses taught that only certain animals should be eaten and sacrificed. When their blood was not being spilt over the altar for ritual, they were slaughtered as food by an agonizing slice to the throat. That way the meat is kosher. Halal, permissible meat, is the same practice used in Islam. The Hindus were the first culture to do away with animal sacrifice and replace it with other food offerings. The Rosicrucian Fellowship teaches vegetarianism. Rudolf Steiner spoke on the spiritual and physical benefits that he received as a vegetarian. The theosophist C.W. Leadbeater wrote that animals are on a lower stage of development than humans, but have the same divine life in them that we do. According to Leadbeater, animals, therefore, are truly our brothers, even though they may be younger brothers, and we have no right to take their lives for the gratification of our perverted tastes. The Amorc Code of Life states that we should respect life in all its forms and look upon animals as conscious and sensitive beings. Yet most of their leaders and members eat meat. Mormon scripture teaches that we should not eat animals unless we are starving in the cold, and that it pleases God when we do not use them as food. Despite this teaching, almost all members eat flesh with every meal. It is even served in the cafeterias of the temples. The LDS Church also owns the largest cattle ranches in Florida and a lot of stock in the Burger King franchise. I was surprised to find out that the Dalai Lama, spiritual leader of Mahayana Buddhism, now eats animal flesh. What happened to ahimsa? Many great individuals and freethinkers have been vegetarian. Einstein, Gandhi, Benjamin Franklin, Leonardo da Vinci, Jane Goodall, Steve Jobs, Pythagoras, Swami Prabhupada, Nikola Tesla, Paul McCartney, Rosa Parks, Plato, etc., etc. The Buddha, Siddhartha Gautama, taught that to become vegetarian is to step into the stream which leads to nirvana. Other animals are very similar to us. Most have ears, 2 eyes, a mouth, 4 limbs, 5 physical senses, and emotional feelings. Socrates once asked, would this habit of eating animals not require that we slaughter animals that we knew as individuals, and in whose eyes we could gaze and see ourselves reflected only a few hours before our meal? Along those lines, civil rights activist Cesar Chavez said, I became a vegetarian after realizing that animals feel afraid, cold, hungry, and unhappy like we do. Eventually, humanity will evolve to the point that eating other animals will be unheard of. The Bible predicts that even the lion will eat straw like the ox. There are some interesting connections between the ascetic practices within Rastafarianism, Judaism, and Hinduism. Among the Israelites was a small group called Nazarites. A Nazarite vowed to not cut the locks of their hair, touch anything dead, eat meat, or drink wine. Samson was a Nazarite with exceptional strength, but he lost his powers after getting drunk with Delilah and having his 7 locks cut off by her. Nazarites also spent their time in the wilderness like hermits. John the Baptist was a Nazarite. When we read that he ate locusts and honey in the wilderness, it should read carob and honey. Locust bean equals carob. John did not drink alcohol or cut his matted hair. Rastafarians also grow dreadlocks and abstain from alcohol. Cannabis is an important substance used by Rastafarians, and it was used as incense in the Israelite temple. Hindu ascetics like the Aghori also grow dreadlocks and smoke cannabis. Some yogis smoke cannabis to suppress sexual desires. A side note on hair. Long hair has spiritual significance for many. Not only the Hindus, Rastas, and Nazarites, but some Hasidic Jews also grow the hair of the temples long. Sikh men keep the hair of the head long and coiled under a turban to soak in the energies of the sun during the day, and let it down at night to take in the energies of the moon. Native American men and women and Pacific Islanders take pride in their long hair. Women of the Vril Society in Nazi Germany grew their hair to the ground because longer hair is supposed to draw the magnetic energies of the earth into the brain and make a person a type of antenna or medium that can receive messages from beings on distant stars. In cultures where men have short hair, women tend to be more spiritually inclined, so there may be a practical purpose to the ascetic practice of growing the locks of the head. Going back to diets, Mormons and Seventh-day Adventists have strict dietary prohibitions. Mormons are taught not to use alcohol, tobacco, coffee, tea, or illegal drugs. They consume a lot of sugar instead, kind of like members of Alcoholics Anonymous. Many Adventists eat only whole plant-based foods and live long, healthy lives. Moderate indulgence. Life should be enjoyable, and the middle way should allow for some harmless indulgences. Like a homemade pie to celebrate a birthday or holiday, an occasional movie for entertainment can be a relaxing way to spend some time. Parties and social gatherings are great for human interaction, as long as they don't turn into a bacchanalia, a violent, orgiastic Roman festival, or something like that. Some have taught that indulgence can be a path to progression. Those in the OTO, or Crowley's lesser-known mystical order, the AA, indulge in drugs, sex, and difficult physical feats to such an extent that they discover their breaking point. The rationale behind this is that by so doing, a person can better know themselves, kind of like learning the hard way. Some people would rather experience failure for themselves than heed wisdom. Jacob Frank was an 18th century Jew that claimed to be the Messiah and taught his followers to break all taboos. His rituals incorporated sexual orgies. Frank taught that the distinction between good and evil is an idea from a false god, and that we should sin as much as we can to bring about a sort of redemption through sin. Rabbi Sabbatai Zevi also claimed to be the Messiah and taught a similar doctrine. Of course, indiscriminate overindulgence is not the middle way, but there may be something to experiencing a variety of life's various experiences. If we are here on this earth to learn through experience, then maybe we should spend a few lives sowing our wild oats and get it out of our system, so to speak. In Steiner's day, he taught that some people might not be ready to be an occultist or a vegetarian in their current life, in which case they should eat meat and pursue a materialistic career. It is true that humans are at various levels of development, but in general, our day and age is a time for the spiritual awakening of the human race. Some years ago, I was meditating during an LDS temple ceremony, and I observed the prominence of the color white in the room. Curtains, walls, seats, and clothing were all white to symbolize purity and perfection. The thought came to me that the decorative elements of the room would appear as one boring shade of white if it were not for the dark shadows that bring out depth. The real beauty comes from the contrast of the dark with the light. Our imperfections give depth and meaning to life. So we return to the simple yet profound symbolism of the yin and yang, black and white in perfect equilibrium.